The portion of Bo has Kuf Hey Pasukim, 105 passages, and the Siman, the mnemonic, to remember the number of passages is the word yimneh. The word yimneh is found in the Torah as one of the children of Asher. And the question comes to mind, what is the connection between Asher and the Parsha of the week? And what is the connection with the letters Kuf and Hey, which equals 105 passages? And all of this is connected to the fact that Yud Shvat, which is the passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, falls out in the week of the portion of Bo. First and foremost, the fact that Yimneh is the son of Asher, one of the 12 tribes. So we know that Asher represents the concept of pleasure. Asher means Asheri, fortunate, and also the concept of Tanug, which is pleasure. So if Yimneh is the son of Asher, this means that Yimneh is an extension of this pleasure. What is the connection between pleasure and the Parsha? We know that the Parsha of Bo deals with the final plagues that God brought upon the Egyptian people, which led to the ultimate redemption, the ultimate geula of the Jewish people. And we know that the purpose of these plagues was so that Mitzrayim, Egypt, and the nations of the world will know, Ki ani Hashem, that I am God, says God. Till now, Pharaoh says, who is your God? Who is Havaya? Who is God? I don't know him. God says, really? I'll let you know who I am. I'll make sure you know who I am. After the 10 plagues, you will surely know who ani Hashem, that I am God. The plagues were to bring the awareness of God to the world. In the Haggadah, after we talk about the 10 plagues, there's an acronym. The acronym of the 10 plagues is Ditzach, Adash, Be'achav. And actually, during the Seder, we take the cup of wine and we pour it by Ditzach and Adash, Be'achav. There are those who have the custom of putting the finger into the wine. If you add up the letters Ditzach, Adash, Be'achav, which are the first letters of the 10 plagues, so you have Dalid, Tzadik, Chaf, Ayin, Dalid, Shin, Beis, Aleph, Ches, Beis, it equals 501. 501 is the same gematria as the word Asher. Asher means pleasure. Asher is the opposite to the 501, which represents the plagues that were brought in Egypt. In other words, how does one nullify the plagues? Through knowing God to a degree of Tanug, of Asher, a degree of pleasure, that a person has pleasure in serving God, and studying Torah, and giving tzedakah, and praying, and putting on tefillin, and lighting the Shabbos candles, and putting on a mezuzah, and celebrating all of the holidays with pleasure. Through this, you know God. Then you don't need the plagues to make you know God, because you are having pleasure in God. So when a person has Asher, which is the father of Yimneh, then you have the antidote to the plagues that God brought upon the Egyptian people. What is the connection between this and Kuf Hey, the letter Kuf, and the letter Hey, which is 105? And how do we connect it with the fact that in the Parsha of the week, we talk about the redemption of the Jewish people? And we are told that God calls the Jewish people Tzivois Hashem, the army of God. Why are Jews called the army? And we know that the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in the Maimer of Basel Lagani that he gave before his passing, in the year 1950, before his passing of Yud Shvat, he says over there in chapter number 10 that the word Tzavos, which means the legions or the army of God, the word Tzava has three interpretations. One is Chayil, and that is a soldier. Number two is man, a time, a fixed time to do God's will. And number three, Tzavayin, which is colors or legions. So what is the meaning of soldier, time, and colors? And the answer is that the kuf and the hey are really opposite letters. The letter kuf looks like the letter hey. However, the left line of the kuf goes beneath the baseline. It goes beneath the line. And the Zohar tells us that when God wanted to create the world, all the letters came before God and said, God, create the world with me. So when the kuf and the reish came, and we know that the kuf and the reish are also similar, first comes the reish, because the reish has two lines, like this. So the reish has a horizontal line and a vertical line. And then the kuf has an additional third line, even though in the aleph base first comes kuf and then comes reish. When the letters came before God, they came in the reverse. And the reish is the introduction to the kuf because it only has two lines. The kuf has a third line. So God said, I cannot create the world with you because you represent letters of impurity, of the sitra achra, of the powers of the other side, of the dark side. And therefore I cannot create the world with you. And the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the Maimer that he gave before his passing that the kuf and the reish are the opposites of dalid and hey. The dalid also has two lines, and the hey has three lines. But the dalid represents holiness, and the hey represents holiness, in contrast to the kuf and reish that represent impurity. And therefore the job of the kuf hey psukim, which we have in this week's parsha, is to transform the kuf that is impure to the hey which is pure. How do we do this? How do we transform the kuf into the hey? So let's understand first of all what the hey is, and then we'll try to understand what the kuf is. So the hey, as we explained a moment ago, has three lines. One horizontal and two vertical. And this alludes to the concept of thought, speech, and action. The thought and the speech are connected because you think and you say. However, action already has a separation. The third leg of the hay is separated because you could talk a lot. You're going to promise, I'm going to build this, I'm going to build this school, I'm going to pay for that shul, and I'm going to help you. But when it comes down to action, people forget. There's a tremendous struggle between thought, speech, and then action. It's very difficult to bring it into action. And that's why there's a separation in the letter hay. However, thought, speech, and action of the letter hey allude to the thought and the speech and action when it comes to the study of Torah and holiness and helping others. And the speech is prayer and to recite Tehillim. And the action is to do, to put on tefillin, to give tzedakah, etc., etc. It's interesting that in the writings of the Arizal it says that the hay follows the dalit. And this is found in the word tzedakah. It says that Arizal, what is tzedakah? Tzedek hay. Tzedek hay. And that is from the letter dalit we make the letter hay. By adding the yud on the left side of the dalit we create the hay. But what does that Arizal mean? That from the word tzedakah we have tzedek hay, and that we turn the dalit into the hay. And the answer is as follows, as the Rebbe explains, that the Hey has the Yud facing the Dalet, representing a unity face to face. In contrast to the Dalet that has the Yud in back of it. Because as we said earlier, the Dalet looks like the Reish, but the difference is that the Dalet also has a Yud behind it. But it's behind the Dalet, it's back to back. It's a unity, but it's a unity that is a external unity. It's not an internal unity. And that's why it's back to back. And similarly, the tzaddik, in the word tzedek or tzedakah, what is a tzaddik? It's the letter Yud on the back of the letter Nun. Again, the Yud of the tzaddik is facing this way and the Nun is facing that way. Again, back to back. And finally, you have the third letter of tzedek, which is the kuf. Here too, the kuf is the letter of impurity, the letter of the sitra achara, of the other side, the dark side. And therefore the letter kuf represents impurity, and the third line on the left side goes beyond the baseline. It's longer than the line of the Hey, implying one who has fallen. He has fallen out, he has fallen down into impurity, he has gone down to to what we call purgatory or Gehenna. This is the word tzedek, and from the word tzedek we got to make the Hey. And similarly, the Gemara says that the Gimel and Dalit represent Gemoil Dalim, to give charity to the poor. And then when the poor man receives charity, it now becomes the letter Hey. So this is the concept of the Hey, which represents a letter of holiness. And furthermore, the letter Hey represents one who dedicates his thought and his speech and action to God and to helping others, etc., etc. In contrast to the other two letters, the Reish and the Kuf. The Reish, like a Dalit, but it's not holy. Why? Because it lacks the Yud in back of the Reish. The Yud is the smallest letter in the Torah, and the Yud is actually the beginning of every letter. Every letter begins with the letter Yud. It's a little dot, and from the dot you draw out the letter. And especially in the Dalit, behind the Dalit you have a Yud. The Yud represents Bittul. Bittul means self-nullification. I'm nothing. When a person is humble, he's nothing, he becomes a receptacle for God's blessings. The moment a person is arrogant, then God says, I and the arrogant person cannot dwell together in this world. So the Reish is arrogant. Even though it looks like the Dalit, it lacks Bittul, it lacks unity. And from the Reish you have the Kuf, which has 3 lines. The Reish has 2 lines, the Kuf has 3 lines. The 2 lines of the Reish represent thought and speech of impurity. Using your mind to create mischief, using your mind to create mischief and to cause pain and suffering to others. And then speaking negative and condescending words. And finally, the third line of the Kuf is committing an action that hurts others and is a violation of Torah law. And therefore we find the Gemara tells us, pertaining to this third line of the Kuf, which is a long line, that this represents a reed. It looks like a reed. And the Gemara tells us in Shabbat, page 56, side 2, that the angel Gabriel went down from heaven, and he took a reed and he put it into the ocean, and from there came pieces of earth, and from this earth became a island, and from this island became a very powerful city by the name of Rome, which became an empire. And this little reed caused all the problems. And this little reed brought about this this empire of Rome, as Rashi says, which was a meitzar li-Yisrael, that caused agony and anguish to the Jewish people. The word meitzar is the same as Mitzrayim, Egypt. The word meitzar means borders and constraints. It also means anguish, like tsuris, problems, tsuris, anguish. Furthermore, we find in the book of Tehillim, it says in Psalm number 64, Samaches, verse number 31, Ga'ar chayes kona. It says, rebuke the beast of the reeds. What does that mean? How do you rebuke the beast of the reeds? The reed, we said, represents the letter kuf, the long leg in the letter kuf. Ga'ar, to rebuke or blast this reed, means to break it. That is no longer a kuf. What happens if you break the bottom part of the kuf? It turns into the letter hey. And now you have the word hine, behold. The word hine, behold, represents holiness. As it says, Va'amar b'yemahu. Isaiah tells us in chapter 25, in that day when Mashiach will come, hine alikeinu zeh, behold, hine. We're going to point and say, this is God. This is our God, our Lord. So hine represents vision, represents revelation of godliness in the world. How do we get to hine? By cracking, by breaking, by blasting, by rebuking. This root of the kuf, we now have the letter hey, which is holiness. The Maggid of Mezritch tells us the following medrash. The Medrash says, when God created Adam Harishon, the angels turned to God and said, God, tell me, what is so special about this man, Adam? Why do you need to create him? And God says, Adam is wise. He is even wiser than you. He says, ha ha ha. The angel said, Adam, this mortal is wiser than us. How could that be? God said, very simple. And God brought all the animals before the angels and said to the angels, tell me, what do you call this animal? I have no idea. What do you call that animal? I have no idea. What do you call the other animal? I have no idea. So God brought the animals before Adam and said, Adam, what do you call this? This? Sure. This is called a bull. What do you call this? Keleb. This is a dog. What do you call this? Oif. This is a bird. Says the Medrash that was the brilliance of Adam. He was able to call the animals by their name. Says the Maggid of Mezritch, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov and the teacher of the Alter Rebbe. He says, what's the big deal? If I would be the first person in the world, and God would bring the animals to me, I would also call them by name. I would call this, instead of a dog, I'll call it a cat. And if I call an ox a bird, who would care? What's the difference? Says the Maggid of Mezritch, that wasn't the brilliance of Adam. The brilliance of Adam was he was able to decipher the letters in the root of the creation of the animal. In other words, when he saw the bull, when he saw the ox, he said, this is a shor, because the source of an ox are the letters shin, vav, resh. That is how the ox is created. The source of the dog is kelev, it's a chaf and a lamed and a beis. The source of a bird is oif, ayin, vav, pei. Adam was able to see the combination of letters that created that animal, that reality. And that was the brilliance of Adam. And we are told that today when a father and mother give birth to a child, they too are given a little spark of Adam. They too are given the insight to know how to name the child. And this insight, this chachma, this wisdom is even greater than the wisdom of the administering angels. That makes Adam great. And that is true not only for animals, but every creature and every creation, even inanimate, even stone, which is called even. Aleph, Beis, Nun, the letters Aleph and Beis and Nun give life to the stone. For God every moment recreates the world anew and blows into the world a soul. Moment, God is creating ex nihilo, nothing into something. So even a rock has a neshama, even a rock has a soul, the vivifying force that gives it the reality to exist and to be. Why is it? Because God made it. That's why it is. So an even is Aleph, Beis, Nun. Those are the three letters of the stone. And says the Baal Shem Tov that these words, these 10 utterances of creation, that God said when He created the world, they continue every moment to hang in the heavens. They continue to bring energy and vitality to the world. With this introduction, we could understand the following. When God took the Jews out of Egypt and He gave them the Torah, He told them, I want you to build for me a mishkan, a temple, a tabernacle, a holy temple. And in this holy temple, you are chumashim. You are to make pillars. What are these pillars? Pillars are spelled with the kuf, resh, and shin. Keresh. Now, on one hand, we just said that the letters kuf and resh are bad letters. They are letters of impurity. On the other hand, now God says, make for me a temple. And in the temple you are to make the letters of kuf, resh, and shin. And in these three letters you are to form a pillar upon which the Mishkan will stand. We find in the writings of Kabbalah that the three letters of kuf, resh, and shin spell out the word sheker, falsehood, and also kesher, which means a knot, because unfortunately most of us are knotted and tied to physicality. We think that is emes, that is truth, but in the essence it's no farther than the truth, because the whole world is sheker, it's false. God says, take these three letters that spell the word sheker and transform it. And transform it into keresh. Transform it into the pillars of the Holy Temple. And therefore we take every physical object, which is material and part of creation, and we use that as a vehicle to serve God. That is the purpose of creation. That is the transformation that each Adam, each human being has within him, the ability to transform the falsehood of the world and make it into a dwelling place for God. And that is the entire purpose of creation. God desired to have a dwelling place down here in this world. And therefore He tells us, make for me a dwelling place. V'asu li migdash, make for me a holy dwelling place, a sanctuary. V'shachanti b'soicham, and I will dwell in them, in the hearts of every Jew. How do we make for God a dwelling place? By using the raw materials of the world, that on one hand represent falsehood, and that the human being is so tied up with, and we use these resources and we transform it to make a temple for God. That is the way we transform the world, and that is the way we bring about ta'anug. We bring pleasure to God, and therefore we bring pleasure to humankind. How do we do this? How are we able to pull ourselves away from this bond, from this knot to nature and to physicality and materialism, hedonism? The answer is through the letter Hey. Through using our mind and our speech and our actions to pray every day, and to study Torah every day, and to give charity every day. These are the three pillars upon which the world stands. And these three pillars give our personal world the microcosm, the vision, and the clarity, and the strength to pull ourselves away from the falsehood, and to use these resources that God has given us to truly build the dwelling place for God. And that is the meaning of Tzivos Hashem. We become the army of God. Each one becomes a soldier. We become stalwart, and we become steadfast, and we become firm in our commitment to God, like the pillar in the sanctuary. And by doing this, we transform the kuf into the letter hey. And by doing this, we transform exile into redemption. And by doing this, we transform the tzach, adash, ba'achav, all the 10 plagues, into Asher, the father of yimneh, which is true pleasure in our life and true pleasure in the world. And that is really the job of every soldier, which we said is the job of every Jew who God coined us and called us, Tzivos Hashem, the army of God. Number one, to be a soldier, to have a strong commitment. But number two, to bring God down into Zaman, into time and space. In other words, we eat matzah on Pesach, not on Hanukkah. And Shabbos is not Wednesday, but it's Saturday. And furthermore, Tzivot means colors. And that is, we acknowledge every Jew. For every Jew has his unique talent. Just like an army has different legions. You have the Marines, you have the Air Force, you have the Army, you have the Navy. Each one complements the other, and you need all of them. You can't say, well, I only need an Air Force. Oh, I only need a Navy. No, each one complements the other. They have different colors. Every Jew is unique. There are those Jews who pray more, and there are those Jews who study Torah more, and there are those Jews who dedicate themselves to charity and good deeds. Each one is unique, and they make up the army of God. And together, we become the Tzivos Hashem, we become the army, the good force, the good letters, to bring light to the world, to bring holiness to the world, and to create a dwelling place for God in this world. And so God takes us out of Egypt, of our borders and constraints, and brings us to a land of milk and honey, a land that is expansive, a land that is beautiful, and a land that is full of pleasure and holiness, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.